Hey, Ray, great to see you. We do have lots to talk with you about. Tommy and me back once again. You got a book that you wrote 16 years ago that is now in paperback with a little addition. We'll talk about that. And, of course, Eagles football. The Birds kick things off 11 days from now. It's a highly anticipated Bird season, of course. What do you think? Is this Eagles team maybe even a little bit better than the one that went to the Super Bowl last year and came up just a little short?
I think I think the defense is still a little bit of a question, just because there have been so many changes. I mean, they certainly have talent there, but you're probably going to have 5 new starters out of 11 and a new defensive coordinator. So I think there's probably a little bit, at least in my mind, a few questions about just how good the defense is and how long it's going to take for them to get all the pieces in place. I think the offense is going to be fine. I don't think there's going to be any issues with the offense, but the defense may be, for the first part of the season, it may be sort of a work in progress until the defensive coordinator kind of figures out exactly what his guys can do, and the players figure out what he wants from them, because the new guys are the new guys. I mean, that's all new to them. But even the veterans, even the Grahams and the Coxes and those guys, they're working with a new defensive coordinator, so it's a little new for them too. So I think at least initially this year, the start of the season, I think the defense may take a little while to find their way. But the advantage the Eagles have is that the front half of their schedule is not too tough. And I think that they'll probably be okay. The offense is going to score enough points that the defense will have enough of a cushion that they'll be able to figure it out. By the time they figure it out and they get to the back end of the schedule where the real tough teams are, hopefully the defense and the offense are on equal footing.
Well, Ray, I think we've all just made the assumption that Jalen Hurts is going to be just as great this year or greater than he was last year. I think last year's improvement was exponential. Can he be that good again, or can he be better?
No, I think he'll be better. I think that he is just that driven. I think that some people have asked me, "Oh, is he going to be changed? Now that he's got the big contract, they're making the big money. He's on the cover of Sports Illustrated." All of that stuff. Is that going to have any effect on him? And I really don't think so. I think he's just a unique kind of player. And I think he's a unique kind of person in terms of his single-minded focus on just his profession. I mean, he is 100% football player. I mean, he's not thinking of being a TV star. He's not thinking of being a corporation. He's not thinking about a career in TV. He's just thinking about winning football games. And the improvement that you've seen in him throughout his career, from Alabama to Oklahoma to his early days in the NFL to where he is now, I mean, every year he's come back as a better model. And last year, obviously, I mean, if you look at all of his statistics, I mean, they all jumped. And, I don't think he spent this offseason just laying on the beach at Turks and Caicos. I think he spent this offseason studying film, evaluating himself, figuring out ways that he could get better, and worked at it. And if you saw him through the training camp and through the preseason, well, of course, he didn't play in any of the games, but just in preseason, the way he looked on the practice field, I think he's going to come out and have another very, very big year.
Ray, the running backs, Kenneth Gainwell, DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny, Boston Scott, 4 pretty solid running backs when healthy, of course. Will any one guy be utilized more significantly or more often than the others, or is it going to be, game to game as far as who gets more carries?
It's going to be game to game, series to series, quarter by quarter. I think that they're just going to – I don't think there's going to be an overall design. I don't think there's going to be a designated number one. I think there'll be certain teams that they play certain weeks in given situations where Penny might be the guy. You might need a little more power. You might need to run the ball between the tackles more. Other games, you'll see that maybe you feel like you want to throw the ball, and you feel like the linebackers can be exploited in passing, and so Swift might play more. I think that the biggest difference is Gainwell showed last year, by the late in the season and then certainly into the playoffs, that he had really kind of supplanted Sanders as the number one back. So the decision to let Sanders go to me wasn't that surprising. Gainwell made that kind of progress. So he'll probably, if you had to go into this and you had to sort of project a depth chart, right now you would probably put Gainwell number one. But I think the other guys are all going to have their role. And I think that the addition of Swift is a significant one because, the Eagles didn't throw the ball to the backs very much last year. And DeAndre Swift is a very good receiver and gives you a weapon out of the backfield that you did not have before. So I think you'll see that part of the offense going a lot more this year is passes to the backs. And if you're a defensive coordinator, good luck trying to scheme this offense because you've got, Brown and Smith on the outside, who are as good a pair of receivers as you got in the league. You've got Dallas Goedert, who's become probably one of the top 5 tight ends. He's in there too. And you're going to have to account for all of those guys in terms of your coverage. And then you have Swift coming out of the backfield behind them. You're going to have to cover him with a linebacker. And there aren't too many linebackers that can run with that guy. So I think you take Swift and you put him in this offense with those kinds of players around him. And, I think he can be a real big major contributor on this team.
Ray, you mentioned when we were talking about Jalen Hurts about not the starters not playing any in the preseason. Minnesota did the same thing. The Steelers, Mike Tomlin comes back and says, well, you can't go in the ring unless you've sparred. How do you like this idea of having the practices that they have behind the scenes against other teams, but then not playing any starters during the whole entire preseason?
It's the way of the league now. I mean, most of the teams are going this route of just not playing the starters. Some of them do. I mean, Andy Reid played Patrick Mahomes in the preseason games. It goes team to team. It's philosophical. But the fact is, if you look at, and this is the way that Nick Sirianni approached it last year. I mean, none of his key players played last preseason either. And they had what, by most people's standards, you would say was a pretty light training camp, not a whole lot of hitting. Certainly no real two-a-days, lots of days off, lots of time off. And there were a lot of questions asked about, Jesus, are these guys working hard enough to be ready for the season? Well, I think you saw, it went pretty well. I mean, they won 14 games, the most in franchise history, and they were very healthy. I mean, they really went through the season with not very many injuries. So I think that they feel like that's a pretty good formula for them, for this particular group. And it worked last year. And, the one thing, and this goes to every team in the NFL, the one thing that everybody says going into the season is, well, we can be this if we stay healthy. I mean, every team's evaluation of how far it can go is always with that asterisk, if we can stay healthy. So, well, if staying healthy is that important to a team in the NFL, and clearly it is, then, Sirianni, the formula worked for him last year. He's going with it again this year.
Ray, in the secondary, you got James Bradbury and Darius Slay at cornerback. Slay getting up there in years. Avonte Maddox, sure to get a lot of playing time. But what about safety? Can we count on Reed Blankenship based on what we've seen? There's a lot of other guys out there, youngsters like Sidney Brown. What do you think of this secondary?
I want to see it. I want to see it before I'm willing to say, yeah, you're good. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson last year was a very valuable player on this team. And that's a significant loss. I was sorry to see him go because he came in and frankly, he was better than I thought he was going to be. I had seen him play and I thought he was a good player, but he came here and was really a big playmaker. I mean, led the team in interceptions and made a lot of big plays and actually proved to be better against the run than I thought he was going to be. he was a ball hawk, but he was also not afraid to tackle. So he definitely helped. And losing him, yeah, that's a loss. The coaches love Blankenship. Hope they're right. They're asking a lot for a kid who was just basically a walk-on free agent last year. I mean, last year he was scratching to make the team. This year he was standing with the All-Pros and civvies during the whole preseason. They feel like he's ready to do that. Okay. You mentioned Sidney Brown. I like him a lot. I thought that he was in the draft, in what I think is going to prove to be a very good draft that the Eagles had this year. And everybody's going to talk about Carter, and everybody's going to talk about Smith, and I understand all that. But I think Brown is going to have impact too. I think I really, really liked him coming into this draft. I mean, I had seen him play at Illinois, and he was one of those guys that just jumped off the tape when you watched him. I mean, he was all over the field, making tackles, getting his hands on balls, intercepting balls. I mean, he had 6 interceptions last year, and that's a lot in a college season. You don't see a whole lot of college players with 6 interceptions, but that's what he had. And he was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year last year. I mean, he played on that same team, that same Illinois team, as Witherspoon, the other cornerback, who wound up being a top 6 draft pick. And he wasn't Defensive Player of the Year. Sidney Brown was. So I think the Eagles got they got a steal there in the 3rd round. I don't know if he's going to be starting week 1, but I would be willing to bet you before the season's over, Sidney Brown is one of the starting safeties, and I think he's a guy that's going to play really good football for this team.
Hey, Ray, Howie Roseman, what a career that fella's had here in town, from wanting to be run out of town, partially run off the team, to now probably considered in the upper echelon, top couple general managers in the league, where everybody wants to keep one eye on when he wants to make a deal because he's going to heist you somehow. Does he deserve all that? I mean, he's put together a great team, and it looks like they have a great future looking forward. They got a lot of young guys on this roster.
Yeah. That's all you can go on. I mean, you judge a general manager by the roster. And, I think that if you talk to most people around the NFL, they would tell you the Eagles have the best roster, top to bottom, of any team in the league. Well, that goes to the general manager. And you're right. I mean, Howie was a guy that this time, a year ago, everybody wanted him gone. And he goes on and he wins NFL Executive of the Year for the 2nd time. So probably should have also won Comeback Player of the Year, given where he was in terms of the public a year ago to where he is today. But he's done a very good job. Now, you can look at his drafts, and he's certainly had his swings and misses. Danny Watkins was one. Jalen Reagor, who just got cut, the other day by the Vikings. I don't know if he has any future in the NFL. They took him over Justin Jefferson. That's still one of those things you just say, what were you thinking? Marcus Smith. I mean, all those skeletons are in the closet. But beyond all that, I mean, this team has been to a couple of Super Bowls with him. They won one. They came this close to winning last year, and they're the favorite to go this year. So you got to give it to the general manager. I mean, the drafts have been a little inconsistent. I mean, there have been some hits and there have been a lot of misses. But generally, he has done a very good job at the salary cap. And their free agent acquisitions over time have been really good ones. And I think that this year's draft was exceptional. It's the first time I've ever given the Eagles an A+ on draft day. But I did this year, and I felt like they deserved it. They came away with a bunch of really, really good players. I mean, the one guy I looked at and I said, I don't know about this guy, was the quarterback, who looked terrific in the preseason. So, even that looks like they were right on it. But I think top to bottom, you look at this draft, you got a lot of really good players, and a lot of players who I think are going to, unlike last year's draft, where I think you got some good players who didn't play a whole lot. I think this year you got some really good players who are going to play right away, and I think make an impact right away.